first and foremost, then a executive coach. I teach at the University of Michigan as well, and I see a lot of faces online here of people who I have coached over the years, so I'm really happy to see all those folks. And as far away as, let's see, we still have somebody in Australia out there, or last time we had somebody who was stuck in Australia. Anthony, you're out there, huh? What's your situation? We can't hear you, Anthony. I'll unmute you here.
There we go. No, I came back to sort out my green card stuff, and in the interim, the international travel ban was put in place, so my return ticket was cancelled. So I'm here until the borders are opened again, which could be several months.
Wow. Are you from Australia?
I'm from Australia, so I have family here. My evenings are spent with my delightful but 83-year-old mother watching.
Oh, well, that's good. I'm with my 97-year-old mother-in-law in our household too. So.
Well, it's nice. My dad died October last year, so she's living alone for the first time, I think, in her life.
Since last night we were trying to pick out a movie, and we picked out Bombshell, which was pretty interesting. I didn't know how she was going to react to it, but having grown up in this world for many, many years and been the secretary and all that, she was quite, and I think I finally talked her into not watching Fox News very much anymore. So that was good. I didn't talk her into it, but the movie did anyway.
I have an equivalent battle.
Okay, good. So the idea today, we're going to have a couple panelists speak, and then we're going to try to include several other people who have comments. I mean, my view has always been to try to take a proactive stance and be a realist about what's out there, and not hope that things are going to change tomorrow, but also look at things as an opportunity and think about, okay, how can I take my passions, my skills, and apply them to solving some of the problems that are out there now. And in the process of solving the problems that people are facing, it seems to lead to new business opportunities. So that's kind of my philosophy, is by being proactive and thinking about what you can do to serve, how you can solve problems, applying your skills, that you're going to be okay moving into the future. So I'm going to introduce Kim Stricker. Kim is a longtime friend of mine, has been a consulting coaching client for many years. We barter, so she makes me look good, and I try to give her strategy ideas about how to run her company. So Kim, I'll let you kick it off, and you can describe what it is you do, what your company is, and you're there in Detroit, so you know what that's like for you. Go ahead.
Sure. I'm Kim Stricker. My company is Social Motto, and we're a social media digital marketing agency. We do quite a bit of consulting work for anywhere from large to medium-sized brands, and we're based here in the Detroit area. And yeah, I just thought I'd share this morning. I was talking with Rob and the team, and just really wanted to kind of share some of the new things that we've been seeing on our end, specifically, you know, utilizing digital media and how brands are really creating that authenticity when you can't necessarily be one-on-one with customers face-to-face. So I thought I'd share my screen and just walk you through a couple different items that might kind of inspire some actions depending on what your business is focused on. So one thing I wanted to just kind of touch on, and a lot of people have seen this, especially the digital and social space, is connecting with your customers on social media during this like crisis moment. I wanted to share like just this example from like Kentucky Fried Chicken, for instance, and how they're really taking it a step above and really showing, if beforehand we never heard of contactless delivery. I mean, that was something that a lot of these organizations just started migrating over to. And then also talking about how they're handling sanitation and hand washing policies and how their drive-thrus are open, and really connecting with people in a very direct and visual way, so that people understand a lot more about how they're going to be reacting to a lot of this, you know, crisis communication aspect of things. So that is, you know, one thing I wanted to kind of mention that we're seeing a lot of, especially in the social media space, is that connection with customers and how we're going to be, as you know, Rob was saying, what that new normal looks like, so to speak. One other thing that we're seeing a considerable amount of is Facebook Live. And I don't know if anybody has joined a lot of these, or, you know, perhaps you were watching the NFL draft last night. That was actually a pretty big digital feat. I tuned in. I never watch football, specifically the draft. But the one interesting piece of that was that there was 100 or more different digital feeds that were coming in and then broadcasting out, which was just unprecedented for the time. I mean, it was a considerable amount of technology that was happening there. And I think they pulled it off fairly well. I was pretty impressed. But what we're seeing on the Facebook side of things is that Facebook actually started to adjust some of their priorities. They paused all the work on some of their other projects, and now they're 100% into how to propel Facebook Live and how to get Instagram Live and how to get these live components up and running as much as they possibly can. We saw an increase of about 50% of people utilizing that feature. And what they're planning on rolling out within the next couple of weeks are, one is that you don't have to be a Facebook user to watch some of these live feeds, which is kind of interesting. It basically features for mega users, like for instance, the NFL or some larger brands. And they're creating it so that you can actually have really great, beautiful content that's streaming and that the bandwidth is able to maximize some of those efforts. So there's a lot happening on the back end that's really going to make this a very usable platform for a variety of different organizations and really making it some great content. And what we're seeing here too is that one-on-one, you've probably seen a lot of individuals moving over to this where, you know, it's a lot of consulting or training and things like that. That kind of personal and authentic one-on-one relationship building has been a great aspect of things for Facebook Live. So I tell a lot of people that if you haven't done this already, to start. Not only Facebook is doing it, but LinkedIn's also doing it. It's in beta mode right now. Excuse me. And what we're seeing even on LinkedIn is an expanded usage. And what they do, if you haven't seen them already, they've been pinging people as soon as somebody that you follow goes live. So all you have to do to get into LinkedIn Live is actually reach out to them, say you want to be part of the beta testing, and then within that month, you have to actually use it once, and then you can kind of join into that whole conversation too. So it's really due to really talk and connect.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me? Okay. So yeah, live is definitely where it's at, and people are in these channels are definitely giving some priority to that particular platform. One other thing I wanted to just kind of touch on, and I think we did this in our last week's meeting with Rob, we were talking a lot about trade shows, and pretty much every trade show that I've been working on the social media side for 2020 has been canceled. And we're even looking at 2021. For instance, I've been working with clients and they're like, I'm not even sure if CES is going to happen in January. So they're really starting to look at how to redistribute their budgets. And what I thought was kind of interesting with this particular chart that I had pulled is where the money is going to be redistributed. And it looked like 28% was going to digital advertising, 14% to content creation. And those are the two that I kind of look at, especially in the social and digital space, is like, you know, people want more content and they want more people to see it. So this is a really great play to really start to look at, how do I create more content? Is it Facebook Live? Is it, you know, LinkedIn Live pieces? Is it some other kind of training or tutorial piece, especially if I'm on the B2B side? And then how do I put dollars behind it so that it gets seen by more people? Those are just a couple different things that I was seeing, especially in the virtual space.
Let people, we have a couple questions before we move on. Anybody want to could take over the screen with a question if you want. Any questions out there to begin with? Okay, Anthony, go ahead.
Are you seeing one of the impacts of this being that people are now willing to become much more comfortable with operating this environment? Whereas, you know, I used it, but, you know, I felt that it was a lesser version of what was going on. Now I've actually embraced it more, and I feel more comfortable. Is that a broader phenomenon?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there's the time to start using that live platform, because there's this, I call it the user and the receiver forgivability. You know, it's not like you have to have this high quality, you know, out to market kind of piece. And they're used to seeing what's happening in the background, that there's some other elements. There might be a crying baby. There might be some dogs kind of barking. People are they forgive those types of things right now. And now is the time to kind of start those practicing elements, to really start to hone some of your skill sets, to get comfortable utilizing some of the technology, utilizing some of the live features, figuring out how you're going to kind of organize yourself a little bit more for a live platform, and what kind of topics you can talk about, so that when things start to grow, we'll see the people that have started early, the early adopters, and how quickly they can start to run, to, you know, folks that are just starting out a few months later. I kind of equate this. I was talking to my husband the other day. I said, it's kind of,
Kim, can you take the screen share off?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I didn't want to cut off you.
You know, I was talking to my husband. I said, I'm kind of excited when there's big changes that happen in the media space that I can see. And I've been a part of two in my lifetime. One was when the SAG-AFTRA talent, the actors went on strike, and people said, how am I going to get like my broadcast? How am I going to watch all my shows? That's when reality TV kicked in. And that was the start of that. And if you remember back to reality TV, how horrible it was when it started. I mean, it was terrible programming, but it didn't stop. And they kept growing from there. And now if you take a look at how much reality TV is out there right now, it's incredible. So I think this is one of those other pivotal moments where we're going to see a lot more real conversations in this type of format, where it's streaming from home, streaming from a location that maybe you can't normally get to. And I call it like real people, real conversations, and that one-on-one connectivity that you get in an online space like this, for instance. I think we'll see a lot more of that, and it's not going to go away.
Any other questions or add-ons for Kim before we move on?
Kim, how does this differ from
Carl, just say who you are, by the way.
Oh, Carl Sly.
What do you do? While we're going around, let's introduce ourselves. So what do you do, Carl?
I own a business in Ann Arbor called Creative Windows, and we've been actively creating content during this whole period when I've kept a lot of the staff on payroll, and we fortunately got PPP funds Monday of this week. How does this differ from Zoom or Microsoft Teams?
Yeah, it's both similar platforms where you can, I'm not sure if Microsoft has a partnership with Facebook or not. I haven't used it enough, but I use Zoom quite a bit. And with Zoom, it actually has an integration with all these social media channels. So for instance, I could stream this into my Facebook Live account or my LinkedIn Live, and I can actually create other elements too. I can create graphics. So like if I wanted to, share my screen with a PowerPoint presentation, you can stream that as well. So it has a little bit more of the back-end capabilities to make your Facebook Live or your LinkedIn Live more dynamic. So it works together.
Anybody else want to add in? I don't know if Stacy, anything going on?
A question.
Google, we should add, or Megan, who asked a question?
I have a question, Rob.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Debbie Merion from sacoaching.com. I have a question about the slide that you just had up, and there was a number there that I thought was interesting. 14% will shift money to content creation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious to hear you say a little bit more about what you consider to be content creation and how you think that will affect people in the workforce right now, what that means in terms of work and jobs.
Yeah, typically when I try to get my clients to think about it when we say to content creation, that it has one purpose. It either entertains, it educates, or informs. And if it doesn't really fall underneath those types of three things for your audience, then it's really not worth value to share. So it's really taking the social channels and sharing those three types of pieces of content of information out there and building that community, building that tribe. And LinkedIn and Facebook Live is just another element on top of that. It's just another piece of that entertainment, education, information type, way to get that out there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah. Rob, I did want to share one other thing that I thought was really interesting too. This one actually kind of spurred a conversation with some of my digital team. So this was actually a good way for us to take a look at things, and it kind of surprised me. Let me share this with you. So right now what we're seeing is there's a lot of opportunity out there for specific types of businesses. And that, I mean that by, there's businesses that are growing in specific sectors. What we're seeing is a lot of, like, for instance, I was looking at is like folks that are coming out with books or cleaning or educational pieces or tutorials. Those types of businesses are doing incredibly well. And it's a really good opportunity to take a look at advertising. So for instance, we haven't seen a lot of advertising dollars from automotive makers or even some of the other larger brands. Facebook's on sale right now, and we're able to get a lot more for our money on these particular platforms. We saw Facebook, their pricing has gone down about 15 to 25%, but the usage has gone up. So on Facebook, on the desktop version versus mobile, desktop version users have gone up about almost 27%. Folks that are using mobile devices have actually only increased slightly, like 1%. So it's a really good opportunity to take a look at how you can make your advertising dollars go further for desktop users. So you can actually select when you're boosting a post or you're doing some Facebook ads if you want it to be shown to more desktop users or mobile users. In the past, about when we would spend for advertising dollars, we would take 70% of our budget and put it towards mobile users. Now it's like the complete opposite. If you think about it, people are sitting in front of their computers. So we're taking those dollars and flipping it and now targeting people that are sitting in front of their computers as desktop users, and getting more leverage off of our ad dollars too. So it's a really great time to take a look at that, and even just play with a few $100s if you want to just test things out.
Stacy Kulangowski is out there from Google. I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about how Google ads are shifting and what's going on in your world. I think she's still there. Yeah, maybe we've lost Stacy. Stacy, you there? I can't hear you. Let's see what's going on here. All right, we'll come back. I can't hear you, Stacy, in terms of no sound coming. All right, we're move on like one of these TV guys to David Haviland. We'll come back to Stacy in a minute. But David, maybe you could introduce yourself and add upon what Kim has been saying here.
All right, great. So for those of you who don't know me, my smaller clients would call me a business coach. My bigger ones would call me a strategy advisor. At the heart of strategy is return on investment. At the heart of investment is evaluating return and risk. And so a lot of the conversations that I've been having for the last 15 years are just the same conversations now, but with a different environment. And so I spent the first 2 weekends after we got locked down. First weekend was going through my consulting toolkit and identifying the tools that I've used for conversations in the past and the ones that would be particularly relevant for the conversations that I knew were coming over the next few months with my clients. And then wrapping an ebook around it, and a workbook. So I'm going to just walk through. I'm going to highlight like 5 different pieces of the workbook that I put together. And if you're interested in these slides, you can see my email address down at the bottom, and I'll be glad to send them to you. Rob's instruction was to keep it relatively short so we could have lots of time for everybody that has insight. And so my aim is to keep this to about 5 minutes. That means that I'm probably going to glance across the tops of these concepts so that you kind of know what's coming. And if you want me to go into more depth, then just ask. First I looked at, there's kind of old normal, abnormal, new normal. And you're doing different things within that down here. At the core of all of that is adaptability. It's interesting though, we call adaptability different things depending on where we are in the stage. Before something bad happens, it's called readiness. While it's happening, it's called agility, and after it's happening, it's called resilience. And so I thought, I started by deconstructing each of those. In many ways, I have an engineer brain, so I kind of try to deconstruct what's happening as a way to have the conversations from a strategic perspective. But I realized that all 3 of these things, instead of being different, were the same thing. And so I came up with this idea of flex capacity, and that really what we're looking to do is have flex capacity in our organizations. And then I'm not going to talk about this in detail, but part of the workbook is 10 different worksheets. So this is the flex capacity worksheet. So this is a way for leaders to both evaluate within their organization how adaptable, how flexible are we, and a kind of guide of how to be flexible. Also, I'm finding clients are using this to communicate out to their teams. Hey, we're in a really good position. We get an A- from a kind of flex capacity thing. So you just see there's business, culture, leadership, market strengths, and then there's just 4 different dimensions on each one of those. Again, we can come back to this if you want to look at it in more depth. But I think kind of the idea of deconstructing what makes us flexible and then scoring ourselves on that will identify things that we can leverage and things that we might need to address. So that's an internal look, kind of both internally and externally evaluating what the impact is. So on the health exam side, which is looking internally, I differentiate between, is this an edge impact, an essence impact, or an existence impact? Edge means we have to change how we do something, but what we do is still the same. Essence means that we actually have to change what we do. And an existence, of course, is whether we're still around. This mostly gets applied to, boy, the sun just came out. This mostly just gets applied to different product lines and different value propositions. But for my client base, again, I work with between 15 and 20 companies, small businesses. And I would say 1/5 of them are really on the ropes. They were in the epicenter. They really got crushed by this. 1/5 of them are actually making out better because of it, and 3/5 are in the middle zone. So that's the nature of the conversations that I'm having these days. So the health exam is kind of an internal look. The seismic map is a look out into the marketplace to say what was most impacted epicenter-wise, what was kind of impacted a little bit, we call that rupture zone, and what's the safe zone. When you look at seismic mapping, there's actually 2 more zones. There's the fault zone and some other zone, but I thought keeping it to that would be, and then I put those 2, well, I put the degree of change, the essence, edge, and none on the y-axis of a grid that we can do. And then the impact on market demand, impact on whether the demand in the industry is better or worse. And that kind of gave a landscape. And again, this is designed to be a conversation with the leadership team. It gave a landscape of what's going on. Remember, we talked about rupture zone, epicenter. So you can also then map on top of that and say, in the red are opportunities to help businesses create demand. In the green are opportunities to help businesses handle demand because they have more demand. And then up toward the top is opportunities to help businesses adjust. So the conversations that we're having are, how do we take our value proposition and then infuse it or focus it in these areas? Just to map that to what we were talking about, epicenter, where you got these things overlapping, rupture is this kind of arc here, and then there are companies that are in safe. And then I found a list of 60 different industries online. And so I just did my version of scattering those onto the chart. And this isn't, I'm not projecting this as right. I'm projecting this as you should maybe do this for your own company. And when I've done this with clients, I've removed maybe 40 of the industries because they're just not relevant for that particular client. And then we can have kind of a robust conversation about where we think opportunity would be and what it looks like, and how to change our value proposition and orientation to it. All right. I see a chat here. Trying to dig out Zoom bingo cards. Okay. So next, turning to kind of creating the plan. I've been talking to my clients in terms of 3 different horizons: a survival horizon, a health horizon, and an opportunity horizon. Back in the old days, that opportunity would have been called growth, but opportunity, I think, is a better word for it now. When I first did this ebook a month ago, it was 3 months, 1 year, 3 years. Now we're at 3 weeks, 3 months, 1 year. Those are kind of the 3 horizons that I'm looking at. So that's the x-axis. You can then place a y-axis and say, well, what are we going to invest in? What are we going to sustain? And what are we going to divest? And put 2 or 3 or 4 things. Again, this is a canvas where we can have a leadership team conversation, and then we can also use this same, once we place the words there, once we place the ideas there, we can use that as a way to communicate out to the company. Here's how we're navigating the 3 horizons that we need to navigate. And here are things that we're investing more in, things that we're investing less in. I'm just working with a client now that's going to do a company-wide meeting about kind of the path forward for the rest of 2020. And much of the company, the vibe is, oh, it must be that we're locking down everything. And I think it's important to be able to communicate how we're investing and how we're divesting. That they're both. And then you can also just lay on top this kind of idea. It's not that green is better and red is worse. It's just, if I were communicating out to a company how they should be thinking about what this chart looks like, I would say the kinds of stuff that ends up in the lower left are ways that we're being more conservative, and the kinds of things that end up in the top right are the ways that we're being more aggressive and strategic. I think I have one more concept to share. So this is about culture and kind of making sure, seeing how well your culture is aimed at the environment that you're dealing with. So on the y-axis, we're going to put the external environment and just, are we dealing with hurricane, rain, or sunshine? On the x-axis, then we'll put the company culture, and let's just call it scrappy, steady, or sleepy. And so you can see, like, if you're scrappy in a hurricane, good fit. Steady in rain, sleepy in sunshine. You have an appropriate culture for where you are.
David, I got a question for you. This is a joke question, but can you name the other 4 dwarfs, or just those 3 of the 7?
I appreciate that too. I'm going to see how I can feed that into this stuff. That sounds great. So we have a green and a red, and then we can even kind of talk about what that means for where we are. I think even if you're in the green, there are still, we have to stay on our toes as opposed to sitting back on our heels. And so I wouldn't want to just have people look at the green and go like, oh, okay, we're good. And so that tool, again, is designed both to have a leadership team conversation about how might we need to change our culture to align with the environment, how might we need to think about our environment, but then, of course, also to communicate out to your company. We as a leadership team talked about this. This is where we think we are. These are the changes that we think we need to make.
David, I'm going to take this as a good transition to our third speaker, Bob Merion, who's actually in the process of implementing a lot of what you're talking about. I don't think he's worked with you directly, but he, in terms of what he's been doing, I think, Bob, that you maybe could comment on bringing that into the reality of what you did, what you're doing, and what you plan to do in the future with, and maybe talk a little bit about your company, how many people work for you in such and such situation. Bob, I gotta hear you. Let's see.
Is that better?
Yeah, we got you now.
Okay. Thanks, Rob. Good morning, everybody. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share some of our experiences. We're going to kind of come at this from a little different direction. You can see I put as my virtual background our Arbor Research building. We had perfect timing. We completed the building and moved in on October 1st of this past year. And I'm not actually in the parking lot, but the building is now basically empty. We're in a fairly different situation than many. We're in the nonprofit sector in a research environment. I'm the president of Arbor Research Collaborative for Health. We're an organization of about 110 people, and all but 2 of us are now finishing our 6th week of working remotely. We made that decision actually more than a week before the governor's stay-at-home executive order. We set our COVID-19 priorities basically in this order. Focused first on employee health and safety, second on our employees' families' well-being, and third on Arbor Research's needs. And really the philosophy there is that if we take care of our people, Arbor Research will come out fine in the end. And as you've heard from the first couple of speakers, COVID-19 is about continuous and mostly unplanned and forced change. And I've been very fortunate to have an amazing leadership team, including a pre-existing disaster management team that was activated very early by our operations team that's led by Colleen Kincaid, who I think is on the Zoom today, and from HR led by Courtney Cooperis. And we looked at the available data out there. We're a data and science organization. So we decided on our own triggers for invoking remote work. And our IT group under David Dickinson's lead basically made sure that when we were ready to pull the trigger, we'd be ready to go with essentially complete remote work. We're fortunate that our mission doing research was amenable to that. So March 13th was our last day in the office. We also decided to be out front and told folks that they would get paid even if they couldn't complete their full complement of work getting done in the first couple of weeks, which we hoped would reduce anxiety during what we felt was a coming bigger period of disruption. And we messaged often, we messaged honestly, and we said many, many times, our answers tomorrow may be different, maybe completely different than the answers we're giving you today because the situation is changing so rapidly. And indeed it did change rapidly. So along came the emergency paid sick leave provisions of the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. And EPSL is a great lifeline. It gives us a way to pay employees for time that they're unable to work directly or indirectly due to COVID-19. It'll be reimbursed through a credit on our employer payroll tax bill, including if it came to that, a refundable payroll tax bill credit. That doesn't get the work done, but it at least gives our staff some breathing room, gives them up to 80 hours of paid leave between now and December 31st that they otherwise wouldn't have. And Courtney Cooperis from our HR manager worked tirelessly to make sure we had this ready to go as soon as we were allowed to use it so our staff could take advantage of it. Then secondarily, Karen Crow, our VP of our finance area, was extremely proactive. And we were very fortunate. We heard one of the other questioners mention the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP. That provides forgivable loans that are run through the Small Business Administration, which is a provision of the second big act, the CARES Act. We were one of the earliest applicants. Karen was getting together our materials that she thought we'd have. We were following the legislation while it was still being debated in Congress and before it was signed into law. And Karen even got a hold of the application form before some of the banks had it. And here, I think this is where relationships really matter. Our longstanding practice, think again, proactive, of cultivating positive and meaningful relationships with the local Ann Arbor bankers like Level One, and Bank of Ann Arbor, Bank of Ann Arbor is a major sponsor of Rob's Leaders Connect group. And level one was terrific with us. We had a relationship with them. We were great, and we are grateful to Phil Weiss and his level one team. They worked with us, and we got our loan approved in one of the earliest tranches of loans that were put out there. And that's important because you can't start using the PPP to pay employee payroll expenses until you have the loan approved. And that will help us to support payroll expenses over the next 2 months. So, okay, people are working safely at home. Finances are more or less in place. What's next? Well, we're a research organization. We have people working at home, and we have a hugely dedicated staff. People can they'll suck it up and do almost anything for a finite period of time. But with COVID-19, we don't know how long finite is. And this was mentioned earlier. The new normal, if it's anything like the old normal, which it probably won't be, is probably going to be a long time coming anyway. So as the days have turned into weeks, we knew our people would be at risk to hit a wall, especially people with kids, elderly members of their households, competing between work and their taking care of their family, educating their kids, and so on. So we've encouraged our staff to speak up early so we can adjust work, reprioritize, decompress crunch times, and be honest also externally with our research sponsors to support our staff. We also decided to establish a mental health bank for our employees to use when the stress of balancing an overly full plate with homeschooling and running after toddlers and being on Zoom and Global Meet calls all day long leaves you sort of brain dead before your nominal workday is done. And we have a very dedicated staff, but they're not superhuman. So they deserve, and we are giving them our full support. And parenthetically, on the flip side, if there's downside on a project, as we have seen in some cases, but fortunately relatively few, it does create that space that's often not readily available to pivot to something new, to a new proposal. And this is sort of one of a series of what I have called silver linings. I've mentioned that in Rob's group before. Bruce Robinson, our VP for clinical research, has really encouraged and facilitated opportunities for us to pursue that maybe in kind of a normal time, we might have looked at and said, well, we're pretty busy doing what we're doing, but this is a time when it's really important to be on top of opportunities, particularly in the research environment, some of which actually are going to be COVID related. And parenthetically, I know that Rob was interested in having Elke Lipke join us this morning. She actually is busy finishing up some grant proposals and couldn't be here. So that gets us to now. Monday will be our 7th week in remote work. So what about the grand reopening? Well, it's not going to be stay at home in reverse. Our disaster management team have carefully studied the 3-phase guidance that was issued recently jointly by the White House and the CDC, both to read the tea leaves for our local situation here in southeastern Michigan, but also to bridge the gap between what people may be allowed to do and what they can realistically do. And we're even trying to think out ahead of the governor, who parenthetically I think is doing a great job. But if, for example, you have little kids who are out of school for the rest of the school year, and if their summer camps have been canceled, we can't expect mom or dad to show up in the office every day, even if it were safe to do so. So we're going to take what we've learned from what we call a natural experiment of total remote work, and that's going to inform not only our phased medium-term reopening, but it's also informing our long-term approach to how remote work gets done and how it gets integrated into our whole mission-based operation. So I would say that's another silver lining of COVID-19. And I would implore people to seek these opportunities. Dave talked about this a little as well. In the midst of all of this illness and fear and chaos and disruption that's COVID-19, there are going to be opportunities. There are going to be silver linings. And if you look for them, you'll be glad when we come out on the other side of this that you identified them. And if you don't take the time to take advantage now, you risk being left behind, whether you're in the nonprofit sector or the for-profit sector. So that's kind of a bird's eye view of sort of how we've approached COVID-19 so far. Major focus on our staff, major focus on our mission. And so far, thank goodness, things have been working pretty well.
Bob, you have a question out there from Ferris. Ferris, are you there to be able to ask the question?
Yes, I'm here. I could turn my camera on, sorry. Hello.
Gee, it looks like you got an empty classroom, Ferris.
It is. Would you like a chair? My question is really about, I loved your statement of what we can do versus what we're allowed to do. Have you thought about, and you might have thought about this part of your whole equation of what people are also willing to do? Because I'm assuming many of the people, some going to be eager to go back to work and some going to be like, go where, for what? So I'm just curious to hear what your thoughts on that of some people maybe taking an extra precautious, not wanting to go anywhere, and some people are going to be hungry to go somewhere. So just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you, Ferris. It's a very good question. And we absolutely have already started to hear comments about this from various members of our staff and Colleen and the disaster management team, as well as HR. We're thinking as a leadership team about how we're going to answer these questions. And I think it's really, for us, it comes back to the employees' safety and well-being and health comes first. We early on, even before we went to complete remote work, we had some staff members who already were feeling uncomfortable coming into the office. So we started that stream even before we all went to remote work. And coming back, I think it's going to be similar. We're going to have people who are going to be reluctant out of concerns about their health or exposure. No matter how we do the reopening, they're just not going to feel comfortable for a while. And that there's going to be a range of comfort with that. And what we'll do is we will evaluate that person's role on a team. So far, again, I think we've been very, very fortunate, but we have people who are able to be very effective remotely. So notwithstanding the other issues of competing for their time and attention at home, I think we'll be able to accommodate a fair bit of flexibility and be able to avoid, for the most part, anything like mandating that certain people have to come back on a certain day. I think it's going to be more permissive than mandatory. We're going to say, starting on this day, these people can start to come back. And we've heard, for example, we have heard that Ford has been physically restructuring their environments where they have big cube farms, taking out a lot of cubes, and, for example, having half of the staff that are usually there come in for a 2-week stint into the office and do the stuff that can much better be accomplished in the office, and then swap those out and have them go home and then spend essentially 2 weeks at home where they can be safe and quarantined again, and have the next group come in. So that way you don't have continuous overlap of people who potentially could still be exposed during what could turn out to be a second surge of coronavirus. So I think we're going to take a very flexible approach to that. And so long as the work can be done effectively, and albeit even with a little bit of reduced productivity and efficiency, with some of the lifelines that are available out there to us over the next 2 months for PPP and till the end of the year with EPSL, I think we'll be able to do that and not have to lean on people to do things that are going to make them feel unsafe.
I wanted to, this is Rob speaking, pitch in about this concept that David talked about in terms of readiness, and agility, and resiliency. And I know that you have put a lot of time and money into the readiness. I mean, this is all possible, but I know I personally worked with you guys, and you put a lot of time into team building, discussing team, building capacity, be sure people are in the right seats. And so could you comment on how you feel like the time you put in ahead of all this contributed to your ability to flex and be resilient?
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. And I think had we not taken that approach and planned, put things into place for all of the various what if situations, whether that's fire, whether that's power outages, or whether it's something that really, came roaring in from left field like COVID-19. You know, I think there's a tendency sometimes to think that, you know, planning for a once in a century event, you know, may not have a good return on investment, but it only takes once. And I think I can speak for my team, and I'm even more confident that I can speak for the staff who we've been hearing from pretty positively about the way that we put this together. And because we had a pre-existing plan and a pre-existing approach, we were able to pivot that toward the specific necessities that COVID-19 presented to us, and do it in a way that was efficient, and that gave, I think, our staff a lot of confidence that we were looking after their best interest and also giving them the opportunity to be able to continue to work effectively. I can't.
I'm gonna give a couple people other chance here to speak.
I see some questions on the chat.
Yeah, some questions, and I also want to give Meg Torrance a chance, she's in the world of creating content. And Meg, maybe you could talk about how you've responded in your company, what your company is.
Sure thing. Thanks, Rob. And I appreciate all the very eloquent comments from all the consultants and people who've been able to provide some insights for us today. So I really appreciate that. So I'm the CEO at Torrance Learning, and we design and develop learning experiences primarily for the corporate environment, a little bit in some higher ed and K-12, but really primarily that corporate space. And we did a few things, right? I was out and about traveling early on, because that's my job, is to go out to conferences and speak and write and do that kind of thing. And we were one of the first people to reach out to the conferences that I was booked to speak at and say, hey there, this stuff is scary, we're out, right? And that was, it was at a time before things started shutting down. So people, that seemed like a really risky thing to do. In the end, it turned out to be one of the best things we possibly could have done, right? So I canceled trips, right? So you've got somebody stuck in Australia. I canceled my trip to Australia where I was supposed to keynote. We focused our efforts on a few things. So we reached out very early on to clients with offers of support. We also built courses specifically to living and working this. So we built a course. So it's what we do, right? We built a course on COVID-19, one of the very early ones that was out released in the corporate space. And then we pulled out, we have 2 courses on how to build and lead virtual teams. And we gave those out for free. First, we led by giving those out to our clients. We then gave them out to 10 different platforms that gave them out free to their clients. And then we put them out publicly for anybody to take. So we've had hundreds of downloads on our courses. We've had thousands of people take it. Sorry, yeah. Sorry, Rob, you and I were both fighting on the mute there. Sorry.
Megan, can you also on the chat put the resources if people want to capture some of those?
You know what, Rob, how about I do that? How about I send you the link? My laptop is being worked on right now, and I'm doing it via my phone. So no I'm pretty sure I'll lose you all if I try to chat and talk.
Oh, no, yeah, that's fine, yeah.
But interestingly, what we're seeing both in our own business as well as our clients' business, right, is there are some people who are looking at how do I recreate this live experience digitally, right? So you see a whole flood of Zoom, you see a whole bunch of virtual classroom, and both in the corporate space and the K-12 space. And that's that Dave was talking about, and we're working with Dave too. Dave Haviland was talking about that kind of that short term, that survival, that 3 weeks to 3 months period. We've also seen some of our clients and doing ourselves that big pivot, right? This is an opportunity to leapfrog the immediate short-term responses. And so we're seeing clients who are moving to entirely new models for their content and their learning. And so that's really exciting too. So it's not very often that the trainers get to be among the first responders. And so this has been a really exciting time for us, at the same time that we're a smaller organization than Bob's, but doing a number of things around making sure our team is okay and set up to work from home as best as they can.
Okay. Thank you, Megan. I'm going to ask Mish to ask a question to David Haviland. Mish, are you there? We lost her. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to ask the question. She was asking, how much, David, does this take, your process? Is it going to be cumbersome to people, or are they going to be able to do it on the go right now?
Yeah, so I think of the tools that I showed as things that you use to structure the conversations that you're already having, and as a toolbox, a toolkit, or a library. So what I'm finding as I apply them to my clients is there are 2 or 3 that are the conversations that company needs to have. It's a different 2 or 3 depending on which company it is. So if you were to sit down with a workbook and kind of work through as a smart leader that can answer these questions, I'm guessing it would take you a couple of hours. And really, I'm an 80-20 guy, so the point isn't to fill them out completely. The point is to be asked 50 questions and see which of those questions raises up an insight that you wouldn't have had if you hadn't been asked that question. So I think that mostly just kind of tools that you would use to structure conversations that you're already having.
David, I wanted to comment on strengths and weaknesses, and you said you're an 80-20 guy, and I'm probably 80-20 myself in terms of coming up with a lot of ideas, but not being the one who's going to finish them to the detail. That's running into trouble for me at home, though, because my mother-in-law and wife are 110% people. So when I do 80% of the kitchen work and then leave a couple dishes behind, it's not pleasant. So it's not always, strength can be a weakness. Roger, you're raising your hand, same thing. Richard, I see you, I think this is, men have this disability of not seeing dirt. That's a terrible thing. I'm going to get in bad trouble for that, but it's unfortunately somewhat true. Does anybody out there know, in terms of flexing, how to move these chats into chat rooms? I know that there's a way to have smaller groups on Zoom. Does anybody use that method, and how easy is it?
Yes, I use it all the time. It's breakout rooms is what it's called, Rob, and it's actually very easy. You could either do 2 things. One, you could assign people, or you could make it automatic. So all you have to do, there are 3 buttons in the bottom, and if you click on them, it just says breakout rooms.
Okay.
And if you click on that breakout rooms, and you could assign us for a specific time, or you could just end them when you wanna, and then you'll bring us all back together. Okay. But if you want to make it remote, like automatic, you could just say put 3 people in every room, or put 5 people in every room, depending on how many rooms you want. It'll ask you these questions. How many rooms do you want? And do you want it automatically, or do you want?
Well, Ferris, I'm going to loop back with you, and next week when we continue this conversation, I'm going to use that, because I know people have a lot to say, and there's a lot of questions to be commented on. But I'm going to do, like, we're going to go into the final round of Jeopardy here, whatever it is, but I'm just going to give people who want to speak up a chance to give like their 25, 30 seconds. If you have comments or resources you want to add. Elliot, this is probably a big challenge to keep you to 20 to 30 seconds, but I wanted you to talk about what you're doing and make your platform known to people, because it's very useful.
Excuse me. Thank you, Rob. We're working in K-12. We have a system called Roadmaps, where it's a visual graph. It's a visual graph for courses, for experiences for kids, and it's self-contained. It's short. It works with the kids. It works with the teachers. It's hard to transition. They're giving the kids paper, and they're giving the kids lists of URLs. It's not working. Nobody can keep track of it all. We put it all in one place. It seems to work. So if you have children and you want to learn, do some brain ventures, we have them. We're at the Center of University of Michigan, Center for Digital Curricula, CDC.
Elliot, will you post that? And also, Elliot was our presenter on Tuesday to a big group of educators, and I will make that video available if people want to get more detail. Haley Mullins, I see you out there, and where are you, in Idaho, right? Yeah, so Haley, you're in healthcare. What are you guys doing to try to flex and take advantage of this situation? I know you're doing a lot of moves in this direction.
Yeah, it's really interesting for us. And so for the folks on the line, I work at a company that creates health education content. So for us, our main partners are payer groups, so large health insurance companies, and then healthcare systems. So Henry Ford, Trinity Health, U of M Health System, those are all clients of ours in Michigan. And for us, I think what we're seeing right now is a big need for us to flex with our partners in terms of working remotely. And so really taking advantage of this kind of new opportunity. Most work I do is travel. So we work on site with our clients. And we're trying to understand how do we do these 2-day optimizations, these 2-day discovery projects, normally that we would do on site and do with our clients. So we're kind of making a big shift that way. Training is also a really big one. We normally do training in person. So we're trying to make that shift there. And then what we're seeing too with our clients is a really big shift in the industry towards things like telehealth and remote monitoring. So I think as an industry, a lot of what we're seeing in innovation right now with companies and trying to bring people together remotely, we're going to be seeing in the healthcare space as well, which I think is really exciting. I think telehealth is a very underused resource, and I think it's a very effective way to have that doctor-patient relationship. And so that's a really, really big shift that we're seeing. So
this is one of those changes that's to your advantage, and it's a matter of seize the moment and take the most that you can out of this situation. It's really useful to be able to do that. And you're
it's exciting, and it's finding that balance too, you know, with clinicians. How do you still have that foster that in-person relationship, still be able to reach more people? So
I know there's some CEOs out there, Scott Holtz, Stephanie, other people who are doing things in their job, trying to manage their workforce. Stephanie, you're one of the people that have been doing this for the longest and been in this tech world for 30, 40 years, something like that. So what are you guys doing to take advantage of this situation?
Well, actually, for us, it's sort of more of the same, because over the last 5 years, we've been doing more and more of our user experience research remotely. So it's actually, the path hasn't changed for us, more it's accelerated. And we're working to find ways of doing ethnography, contextual anthropology research, how much of that can be done remotely. And we're finding a surprising amount can, which is actually very exciting.
Well, and Scott, do you have any comments? You run a company, as I recall?
Well, thanks for the promotion, Rob. I'm not quite at the CEO level, but I do lead a branch office for a company called Southwest Research Institute. And that company is based in San Antonio.
I will officially promote you right now. So
thank you. We're blessed to be very broad and diverse in the work that we do, sectors, government, commercial, and the clients that we work for. So the company's doing fine. It's interesting. I get to see some of the utilization numbers that come around, how each of the verticals are doing, and quite a few of our researchers have improved their billable utilization by being at home. And it's interesting to see if that's gonna stick around. The division that I report through is powertrain engineering, and that's heavy with capital equipment. So engines and transmissions and batteries and hybrids means a lot of work in the laboratory. And so even though we're an exempt organization with the ability to put people in the lab, we've been very conservative, and that's been a challenge for sure. But yeah, new normal. I agree with the other comments earlier. It's not going to be a light switch back on. We're going to be ramping up and keeping everybody safe. But so far, so good.
All right. Well, it's 9 o'clock. I know some people. I don't know where the hell you're going to, but some people have to get off the phone and maybe go to another Zoom call. I get to go to Ace Hardware to do a pickup today, so I'm really excited about that. I got my gloves, my mask, everything ready. I feel like a goalie going out to play hockey. You know, it's like my chest protector, everything. But I'm going to leave this open now for questions for the speakers, because I know everybody's had some back to Kim. It seemed like an hour ago. It was an hour ago, but let's open it up for more questions or comments, and we'll keep the screen open until we get down to like 9:15 or so. Richard. Oh, you're signing off. Okay. Any comments?
Rob, I was curious. I'm one of the things I'm doing in Australia while I'm here is I've ended up advising a refrigerated vehicle renting company, which has been it's been an interesting ride. But they're in an extraordinary position. They've had the best 2 months in their entire history in the last 2 months because of the shift in the food delivery market. And one of the big conversations is how long will it last? What sort of investments do they make? So one of I think the things that I'd really like to hear people, I'd like advice and to hear people talk about is how to really assess the opportunities, what the long-term nature of the opportunities that this change will present, and a framework for assessing them.
Dave, you want to take that one? Dave, you got click on there.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just getting a text for my 9 o'clock meeting. Could you repeat the question? I'm really sorry. Or just bounce to somebody else.
No, it's okay. It was the question, Dave, is I'm doing some work for a refrigerated vehicle company. I'm advising them while I'm in Australia, and they've had the best 2 months of their lives in the last 2 months because of the shift in home delivery. And now we're having this interesting discussion. How long will this last, and how do you assess the new opportunities? How sustained will they be? And so they've got some investment decisions to make, and they're difficult. And I'm trying to think through what a framework for assessing that looks like. And I'd really like your advice.
Yeah. So again, we have more uncertainty, but those kinds of investment decisions are the same ones that we've always been asking. So I would want to get as much data as possible on the market, and my experience.
Lost you, David.
Muted, yeah. In small companies, we don't have a lot of investment that we can make in research, and so it's mostly about people. Like I would make an assignment ahead of the meeting to say everybody needs to go online and just search around for trends and things like that are about what's happening in the marketplace. Let's bring that to the meeting, and then stick up. Well, we can't. It's not going to be in a room. So let's gather that thinking and spend an hour coming to some kind of alignment of whether we think this is going to be significantly different for 3 years or significantly different for 6 months or whatever it is. Is that going in the direction that would be helpful?
Yeah.
Okay.
I also wanted to add a little bit about that in terms of mindset. I'm a psychologist, and I think if you think about people, there's people that are ready, aim, fire, and there's people that are ready, aim, we'll be back with you next week. And then there's people, and I guess I put myself in this category, which is ready, fire, aim. And I think that right now the ready, fire, aim people are important because you have to be able to make decisions on a little bit of data and hope that you're guessing right. And obviously you're not going to want to put a lot of money into things, but there's a lot that can be done right now if you just try. And some of the big companies are moving. My son works for the New York Times, and I'll give you an example. He's an editor there. There on Sunday, your paper's going to look different if you get to the New York Times. There's no longer two important sections. Be ready for this. There's no sports section, and there's no travel section. And instead, they've got a new section, and actually my son Adam named it, and it's called At Home. So I think this is just an example. And then, this is a big major company with hundreds of thousands of millions of people following it, and they've made that decision quickly. I sat in on one of their editorial meetings about 6 weeks ago, and they said, we're shifting to full coverage on COVID. That's going to be the big thing. And they named an editor for that section. So this is the need, I think, to be able to make decisions, and maybe they'd be wrong. Maybe nothing would happen. As it turned out, it was rather prescient. They also are still launching a big project, which I can't name, which is they had planned for months, and they're going to continue to do that even though things have changed dramatically. So it's an example. I think what you're experiencing right now is Leaders Connect Zoom is an example of ready, fire, aim. I had no idea whether this is going to go, and from week to week, I'm not sure what the next program will be, but 60 to 70 people are showing up, so it seems to be working in that regard. Any other comments? Deb, you had a comment. Deb Orlowski, are you out there?
Yes, I am. I'm still
Okay,
here.
about nonprofits, can you comment? There's a few people in the nonprofit world, and what are your challenges here?
And it's sort of, I think Megan is already off, but we have an annual conference that's supposed to be coming up in the early October, and there are several of us who feel that for a lot of reasons.
Could you promote your nonprofit just so we could send you money?
Oh, yeah, it's called CIATAR, Society for Intercultural Training, Research, Society for Intercultural Education, Training, and Research. So it's interculturalists, it's people who work internationally, it's people who do diversity, equity, inclusion type of work. And it's an organization that traditionally has been fairly conservative. It's a fairly small organization. We have a very, very limited budget. We booked the hotel last year, and now we're having trouble getting refunds. And there's a small cadre of us who believe that, and so the board wants to go ahead and have this in person. There's a small cadre of us who feel that we are not only not going to get very many people to come in October because we're afraid of the resurgence and stuff, but also that we're missing a tremendous opportunity for broadening our base, broadening the people who can attend, because if we do a virtual conference, we literally have the world as a potential audience. So my question is, if you're in one of those situations that you just mentioned, Rob, where it's ready, aim, 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 yeah, we're not going to fire yet, we're scared, for some really legitimate reasons, what might be some compelling arguments, or do you have any advice for helping people see that this is an opportunity rather than let's batten down the hatches and hang on for dear life until this passes?
Okay. Bob, you want to handle that in terms of getting people to move when the data's not all there?
Yeah, well, I think, there's the old saw that if you fail to make a decision, you've made a decision. And I think that it's just as important to examine the consequences of not acting. Because usually there are significant consequences to not acting. And I certainly agree with you that there are many people who think that conservative aim, gather more information is the safer way to go, but it's not. That's a misconception in my opinion. So I think recreating that balance so that people understand that not deciding to do something is deciding to not do it, and you should ask people to think about what are the consequences of not doing something, because they're likely important, and particularly in this environment, as Dave and others have talked about. You can't. This is not the time to be holding back and not making decisions. It's a time to kind of just go with. You have to sometimes go with your gut and do what you think is the right thing. But that's a cultural shift that you can't simply mandate. You have to bring people along to that.
Well, I think we could see also in our leadership the going too far on that extreme, and I don't mean this to be joking, but embracing an idea because it's an idea and your gut says it's okay. There was an article this morning about our president saying something about people should use disinfectants, and he grasped this idea because he's kind of desperate at this point to think, what can you say as a leader? And but you could also give really bad advice by just jumping on what's out there, what you heard 5 minutes ago. So there has to be that balance, and I think one of the ways to deal with that is to always, work with the team on it, not to make decisions independently. Some of the worst decisions I've made are the ones that I've made without consulting with anybody. So I think if you have a bright idea, it's a good idea to vet it with a few people before you put it out there publicly and be sure that it's the right direction. Dan, you're out there. Are you still with us? But you've been working remotely for a long time. What tips do you have on ways to work well remotely with screaming kids and barking dogs?
You mean this, Dan?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've been doing this for 8 years, and I've carved out a really nice space with doors. I try to do as much by video chat as I can. I meet with my team, every week and try to put the screen near the camera so we're almost looking at each other's eyes, right? It's not quite the real deal, but I have a good internet pipe, and I can sort of simulate an in-person transaction to sort of compensate for the fact that I can't see people's body language and, what's going on, the other hours of the week. So, just try to do, sometimes I'll take a sales call just to learn something, right? When otherwise I might have, shut that down pretty quickly. And now at work, we're doing a lot of, happy hours and so forth. But for me, not much has changed compared to a lot of the other folks at my company.
I'd like to do a program next week on at home. And maybe, Dan, you could be one of our speakers, people who have done that well and have figured out some ways to work well at home, because I think, again, this is going to be the future. And, I'm over 70, so I'm being told probably even when people go back, I'm not going to be the ones that they're going to want to go back to the workplace. So I'm going to have to learn to flex. I do a lot of small groups, Jack and a couple other people who are out there have been in my small groups. I don't know how many people are going to want to sit around my nice table for 8 in my office and have groups anymore. So working at home, I think, is going to be something we're going to have to figure out. And I think in terms of seizing the moments, I'm going into leisure wear for men. I think the jumpsuits, the old polyester suits are going to be in demand, so I'm buying them all up online, and this is my new business. This is just joking, but it's not a bad idea, So,
hey, Robert, can I add something?
Yes, Sarah.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm with Structured Health Resources, and like Dan, I've been remote for 24 years, and we do ergonomics, helping people be more comfortable. And we've done virtual ergonomics for 16 years. So maybe we want to, for your at-home effort, really talk about our posture and how to be more comfortable and techniques. It's very basic. It can help people really feel better in these new environments. And that's where we're seeing a lot of challenge. There's a lot of promotion, maybe of unnecessary items. And I feel like there's a great opportunity to educate your amazing team on some of these.
Sarah, what are your top 2 or 3 tips?
I will say those. 1 is to sit back in your chair and try to make a chair comfortable. 2 is to not reach or rest onto your desk. So I see, you can see the posture of people kind of leaning in. So we want to kind of.
I've already made 2 mistakes.
Yeah,
so.
There you go. And the other is to drink a lot of water and really hydrate your body. That helps move a lot. It keeps you using the facilities and helps your digestive tract. You don't really need to buy the stand-up desks, but if you just facilitate movement in your day, and there's a number of techniques, including water consumption, that helps with that. And excuse my casual attire. Today's a running morning, and I haven't got that in yet. So.
What about, is your setup for video ideal in the sense that have you done that purposely? You got a little picture back there of a light on you?
No, and actually I didn't plan to turn it on because I was going to run. Roger Rail, my neighbor, so kindly invited me to join your group today. Hi, Roger. And so no, this does happen to be a little sitting pretty kind of plaque from my great aunt, but there's a lot of techniques. And you were mentioning the New York Times and at home section that your son has been involved in. The tagline ergonomics at home is one of our URLs to our virtual service, which we've offered for 16 years. And what's been amazing is that we didn't anticipate this, but the outcomes have been the same from a virtual ergonomic assessment as a face-to-face. Now, we never would have anticipated that. And so there's an opportunity to our team here that there is an opportunity for us to be successful in this new virtual world.
Okay. Well, good tips. And I failed on all three of those. I'm leaning forward, drinking coffee and sitting up in my chair. So anyway, I'll call on you, Sarah, for a little consultation after the meeting here. But put those tips up there. I like those.
All right, will do.
Share them on. And I would share
Hello, Rob.
Yes, hello. Who's there?
Hi, this is Jan McDermott on the call. I have two questions. One for Kim, and I know Megan's already gone, but Ferris.
So Kim is gone.
Oh dear. Well, is Ferris still there? How about some suggestions? For those of us, I am your peer when it comes to age category, and of course not nearly so accomplished on all of these new technologies. So where do we go to gear up as we pivot our businesses to work more online? And then the second question I had was for Bob. And that is, Bob, you mentioned that you were making adjustments for mental health services for your folks during this stressful time as they deal with all of the different challenges in their home environment as they work there. Who are you using? How did you find whatever group it is you're using? And how do they access that kind of service?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Jan, for that question. And so we're taking two approaches. I actually responded on the chat with some of it, but we have for a long time used an organization named Uliance, and they provide a full range of employee assistance programs that are available to our staff. They're available on a confidential basis, and that's been included as part of our staff benefits package for a long time. But I also think there are two other important elements. One is that we did decide with respect specifically to COVID to create what we call a mental health bank. And so we're making available 40 mental health hours that are incremental to PTO hours that our staff earn along the way, and they're separate from the emergency paid sick leave hours, which are limited to 80 hours under the Families First Act. And so that's one way we're doing that. So I think it's important to have resources that your staff can be referred to, but you also have to make sure they have actual time to take advantage of that. I would say one of the more common things we're seeing from our staff is they feel this tension because they're so dedicated. They want to take good care of their families at home, and they also feel very responsible to do their work. And I think it's dealing with, I'll just say in some cases, I think there's a lot of guilt that if they're working their full day, they're not giving enough attention to their kids or to their parents who are living with them. If they're taking the time that they need for their family, they feel guilty that their work is getting behind, or that and we have a very much of a team-based approach at work. So they feel like they're letting the team down. They don't want to be the weak link on their team. And so the third piece of this is that we have specifically counseled not only our staff, but also counseled all of our managers to say, you need to be proactive. You need to be checking in with people. We don't expect every one of our managers to be mental health professionals, not by any stretch, but we want to encourage those conversations so that we find out if people are experiencing these strains and these stresses. We want to know early rather than late. so we can guide them to appropriate intervention.
Bob, I'm gonna let that be the last word. I'm gonna wrap up for now, and I'm gonna get back next week. We'll come back next Friday, and the topic will be at home, looking for ways to work well together. And Jan, I think I would hope if somebody could help Jan with that question, it's an important one. How do people who didn't grow up with technology learn it, you know, in their 60s, 70s, and so on? And right now, it's like just you know, I asked the question about how do you do small groups on Zoom, and Ferris identified himself as a resource. I think that you know, we need to reach out to people that can help one another. So maybe somebody could get back to you and give you some resources. So thank you all very much. Good to see everybody. I won't ask anybody to stand up because you all look good from the head up, but I don't want to, anybody's wearing pajamas, I don't want to know. Jack, you're laughing. You must have, I won't ask Jack, but probably slippers on, right? All right, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, thanks.